Everyone. We got a good lunchtime crowd. Hopefully everyone has got their lunch, the brown bag. So today's webinar is kind of like an opening for what's coming either this spring, over the summer, or into the fall, kind of preparing for that new 3-year plan, new goals, new metrics, those kind of things, targets, getting everybody prepared. So we're over a year away from the submission of the next 3-year plan. So we're giving everybody a long runway, but over the next, 14, 15 months, we'll be offering webinars and workshops and I don't know, office hours, you name it, on a variety of topics. And that's kind of what I'm going to cover today is how these topics connect with state level goals from the Chancellor's Office or the CDE, K-12 Superintendent Initiatives, things like that. So if you want to go to the next slide, Veronica, and I'll just go over the agenda really quickly. So I'll talk a little bit about the purpose, then we'll review the state level goals and initiatives. Then we'll talk about how those goals and initiatives are shared goals with adult education. And then we'll review the state priority areas as far as how we're going to roll out professional development and technical assistance related to those shared goals. And then how that connects to planning and effectiveness. And then hopefully we'll leave a lot of time for any kind of questions or whatever's on your mind, kind of like an office hours. And then Veronica will do the closing with upcoming webinars, either related to information that we talked today or things that are just coming up in the next few weeks that you might have already signed up for. So next slide, please. Okay, so today's webinar purpose is to review the state level vision goals and initiatives, how that translates to adult ed and non-credit, and share the structure and priority areas that will assist in the rollout of professional development to support these areas, as well as discuss how our shared goals will drive your planning efforts and push for greater member effectiveness. So hopefully that's clear. That's what you signed up for today. If not, we can bring Jay right in here to talk about TOPS Pro, but I don't think that's what you signed up for today. But anyway, okay, next slide, please. Okay, state level goals and initiatives. So first I'll talk about the California Department of Education, the Superintendents Initiatives. And then secondly, I'll talk about the California Community College vision goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so just high level here, Superintendents Initiatives, closing the digital divide kind of pertains to all, K-12 students as well as adult learners. We realized that during the pandemic, the huge digital divide, and that's one of the Superintendents Initiatives. Also statewide literacy, and I think that includes all students, whether you're an adult student or a K-12 student. Reducing chronic absenteeism is probably more of a K-12 focus on the Superintendent's Initiative, but we do want to see our K-12 adult students achieving that 12 hours of instruction as well. And then closing the achievement gap that's related to equity, and that's been a thing we've been dealing with for a while on the achievement gap, and now looking at it through an equity lens. We've heard a lot about that, and that's something that we've been doing all along in adult education. And of course, lastly, jobs for tomorrow, which ties into our main focus for the adult education program is transition to employment and or post-secondary. So next slide, please. So then moving over to the Chancellor's Office, their vision for success has more specific goals. And so I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but so they want to increase 20% the number of degrees and credentials, or they want to increase by 35% the number of students transferring to a UC or CSU. Or over the next 5 years, they want to decrease the amount of time that students accumulate to earn their associate's degree. So kind of accelerated learning. And then there's 3 more vision goals. Next slide, please. And so the top one here is increasing the percentage of exiting CTE students who report being employed in their field of study. And then reducing equity gaps across the above measures through faster improvements among traditionally underrepresented student groups. So the equity issue coming up here, and then also reducing equity gaps between regions, or the achievement gap, mostly kind of a rural versus urban that we're seeing, remote versus metro, those kind of things. So that ties back. So then we took this and said, well, how can we make this more of a shared goal with adult education? So next slide, please. So when we're looking at things like, degrees and credentials and things like that, for adult education, it's more like credentials and high school diplomas or high school equivalencies. So our goal is to increase, our credentials and high school diplomas and high school equivalencies. So instead of transferring to UC or CSU, we just want our students to transfer to community college coursework that could lead to that degree or credentials. So our first step would be to increase the transfer to community college credit. And when we mean transfer, there's a long series of transitions. So we have our ESL students transitioning, or ABE students transitioning to ASE. We have our ASE or ESL or ABE students transitioning to CTE. And then of course, we have all those students, hopefully, eventually, if this is the path they want to go and this is their goal, transitioning to community college credit coursework. And so this would be either, on the non-credit side or the K-12 adult side as well. And then when we talk about decreased unit obtainment, what we want to do is we want to accelerate that learning, but we also want to get our students to that 12-hour mark. So we want them to persist so they can make achievements, they can get an educational functioning level gain, they can get their high school equivalency or their diploma, they can get a certificate for the job they have. So, our unit attainment is a little different than what the colleges are looking at, but we still want to accelerate learning. We still want to get our students to the 12-hour mark. We want them to retain. We want them to persist. So it's a nice shared goal there as well. And then increase employment for CTE students. You saw that in the vision goals, but we want to increase employment for all CAEP students as long as they're looking for a job or looking to get a better job. And then of course, we realized in the 71 consortia around the state for CAEP, we do see some regional gaps, especially kind of in rural remote areas. Of course, they don't have the leadership capacity. They sometimes the students have transportation issues. Not necessarily there's a plethora of adult ed programs in some regions, so it's tough to get there. So we want to reduce that equity gap among regions. So it's a fair and level playing field for all students in all regions. And so that's kind of a shared goal as well. So you can see that kind of crosswalk between high level superintendent initiatives and the Chancellor's Office vision goals down to our adult education shared goals. So next slide, please. So how are we going to move forward in our shared goals? And so this started back in I guess last year during the summit. And so we had to come up with categories of strands or program areas or whatever you want to call it. And we determined that these were kind of priority areas. So we call them state priority areas. And we chunked out summit based on these areas. So now we're moving forward into this year and beyond. And we're trying to align our professional development as it relates to the shared goals to connect with these program areas that we think are critical to the success of the shared goals and would be important for you to use in your planning efforts and trying to strive for member effectiveness or consortia effectiveness. So I'm going to go over these each in a little more detail. So there's equity, leadership, learner transition, marketing, professional development, which includes curriculum and classroom, as well as program evaluation and technology and distance learning. So when I go through this list, we'll kind of define what these mean, and then I'll talk briefly about the upcoming webinars that we might have or things that we presented at the summit that you might see again, or we might be scheduling again for another session, or they could be something that we're going to build on for the upcoming summit in October. So with that, let's get into it. Next slide, please. Okay, so when I talk about equity, equity is being fair and impartial with learners, partners, and the communities we serve. Programs aligned to this area may focus on methods for building cultural awareness, responsiveness, addressing equity in the classroom, addressing the achievement gap, creating access, success, transfer opportunities for historically disadvantaged populations. Now, some of the sessions or webinars that we've done in the past covered like implicit bias, classroom strategies related to equity, equity-based professional development. But also when we talk about equity, we're going to be looking at things like how do you track your student barriers, or how do you address student barriers? And so that's going to be a big emphasis in the 3-year plan going forward, is how is your consortia doing with equity and student barriers? How are you serving those students that might have, be English language learners, or they are low literacy, or they're unemployed, or, those kind of things. We also have, things about the crosswalk between the educational functioning levels on the WIOA 2 side from the National Reporting System, and then crosswalking that over to the community college CB21 levels below transfer. What does that look like? How can you use that? What does that mean for course progression? What does that mean for equity as far as advancing ESL students and other students of color through our system, so they're not left behind in that transition and that acceleration? So we got a lot of, and that's just kind of a short list of programs that we might be offering this spring and into the fall and at the summit. There should be more coming out on that too. So next slide, please. So the second one is leadership. So leadership deals with important things leaders need to know about successfully managing a consortia or managing their adult ed K-12 or non-credit agency. Programs aligned in this area might focus on regional and local policies, developing systems, supervision and management of staff, organizational change, leveraging resources, or capacity building, all critical parts to developing that plan and moving forward. In the past, we've offered kind of like a consortium management overview. We've done kind of office hours or quarterly meetings for leadership. We're thinking about launching something like a leadership academy. Then there's also webinars we do on looking at your data from a leadership perspective, using your Launchboard data, using your TopsPro data, all those kinds of things that go into being an effective leader. Also, just a heads up, we're going to be starting next year as part of your CFAT in 2022. You'll also be required to complete and have certified by all your members a governance document. And so what'll that be will be the similar governance document that you did back in 2015 at the start of this program. Some of you have updated that, but what we'll do is take that and put it into Nova, and you'll be updating that document on an annual basis as part of your CFAD process. And so we'll probably add a couple of, one second. Sorry about that. So we'll be adding a governance document in there that you'll be completing and certifying. We'll also be adding maybe a couple of questions on bylaws related to carryover and bylaws related to member effectiveness. So those are all critical to leadership of having that discussion with your consortia and their members, and agreeing upon governance and bylaws and decision making. And so look forward to that. Next slide, please. Okay, then the next one, this one's kind of a jam-packed one, is learner transition. Moving learners along in educational and career and other paths is one measure that we determine success. Programs aligned in this area may focus on college and career pathways, transition support, counseling and support services. Examples include things like short-term CTE, integrated education and training, dual enrollment, pre-apprenticeship, bridges and boot camps, mirrored courses, prerequisites, you name it. Tons of learner transition models out there. I just can't wait to see the 1920 CAEP data to see how our transition efforts are taking hold. It should be released probably by the end of the month, we hope, if all goes well. And I want to see that 18-19 student enrollment, and then what happened the following year in 1920, what happened in that transition, looking at those students transitioning from ESL or ABE to ASC. And as I said, those students transitioning to CTE as well. And then all students, if there's a transition to post-secondary. Next slide, please. So the next area is marketing. Marketing programs and learner recruitment are ongoing responsibilities for consortium members. It's also vital that local communities understand and support regional consortia. Programs aligned to this area should share successful marketing strategies and practices, such as employing social media in marketing, budgeting for marketing, using data to target marketing efforts, or strategies for keeping marketing current and effective. So some of the efforts that we did, we partnered with CCAE recently, and we did some marketing efforts at a regional level, at the consortia level as well within the region, success stories from the students, success stories with administrators and program coordinators. So we were really impressed with that, and we hope there's more marketing efforts that will be showcased later this fall and into the summit. So look forward to that. Next slide, please. So program development, which is constant program improvement, is at the core of building stronger and relevant consortia and agencies. Programs in this area could focus on any of the approved CAEP program areas, the annual and 3-year planning, building partnerships, leveraging funding, or implementing specialized programs, such as programs built around immigrant integration framework. And so you'll see a lot. In fact, I think just this week we have some kind of follow-up or communities of practice that are starting around immigrant integration and learner transition. So kind of a kickstart related to program development. We'll also be looking at, I think there will be webinars coming out on essential partnerships, as well as workforce pathways, and things like that. So whole host of program development activities that you can tap into and take advantage of. Next slide, please. And then program evaluation, ongoing assessment of programs is at the core of building stronger and relevant consortia agencies. Programs aligned in this area focus on data to inform your annual and three-year planning, your programming, instruction, evaluation design, engaging stakeholders in the evaluation process. So that's going to be critical in your three-year planning. There's a couple of sections that you have to evaluate your enrollment. You have to evaluate your leverage fund sources. You have to develop kind of action items around meeting the needs, all kinds of stuff. And we'll be hosting some webinars in, I think, late May and June to kind of dig a little deeper into the three-year plan. I know CASAS and West Ed will be having webinars probably starting this month into May and June to talk about data and planning and how to utilize that. So kind of a full court press on program evaluation. And that'll be going on as we lead up to that three-year plan submission, and as well as looking at goal setting and targets related to the three-year plan. So more to follow on that, and much of a deeper dive on this topic as well. Okay, and I think we have one more slide, the last topic. Technology and distance learning. State priority focuses on integration of technology into education and work environments, as well as implementation of a blended or distance learning program. Programs aligned to this area might include anything related to reaching out and serving adults at a distance, or whether it's asynchronously or the other one. Programs might also relate to technology goals that agencies or consortia have identified or implemented. And this is stuff that you guys are living through right now with the distance learning. And so we've had a lot of support from the state, you know, in the guise of OTAN and with CASAS and local agencies dealing with remote instruction. And so we'll continue to support that and provide webinars and access to tools and things like that. So next slide, please. Okay, so before I get into planning effectiveness, I'm just going to check with Veronica and Holly if we had any questions.
Yes, there were a couple questions that have come up. Let me scroll up in the chat. So on one of your slides, before you got into the definitions of the state priorities, you had mentioned about unit attainment. And so someone wanted to know, what is unit attainment and how does one obtain a unit?
Okay, so when the Chancellor's Office referred to unit attainment, that would be towards your associate's degree. So how many credits or units? So there's a certain amount of credits or units that you have to obtain to get that associate's degree. I guess in the past, students were overachieving, taking too many credits or units and kind of stalling out into their college pathway. And so when they could have been accelerating and moving on a lot sooner. And so that's what they mean by unit attainment. So kind of accelerated learning for the student, if that makes sense. And was there another question, Veronica? Was that it? I think.
There's one more.
Okay.
Okay. And then how is unit defined?
So unit would be whatever the community college uses as a unit attainment. I think there's a technical definition that we use in adult education through TOPS Pro, through CASAS with the NRS. So there is a technical definition there that we could supply them. And so if Veronica, if you guys want to connect with that person offline, we could have CASAS or somebody else follow up with them as far as the technical definition of unit attainment and what a unit is defined as.
Okay, got it. And I think those are all of the questions. If anyone else has questions, definitely post them in the chat and we will get to them.
Okay, So we're gonna have plenty of time for questions, discussion, anything on your mind. Um, so how this relates to planning and effectiveness. So in the 3-year plans, like I said, we're going to be looking at, you'll have to do your needs assessment of what's going on in your region. You'll have to do an evaluation of your enrollment. And so the legislation calls for an evaluation of your types and levels of services. And so what we mean, well, how we define types and levels of services, type of service would be the program area. Level of service would be your reportable individuals as defined by the federal government as 1 hour of instruction or services or more. And then the next level would be 12 hours of instruction or more. And so we'd, in Launchboard, we'd put into Nova kind of a grid or a table showing your members, what their enrollment is for 1 hour or 12 hours by your program areas. And then you would be required to evaluate what that means. And how that is moving forward in your 3-year plan. How do you see, what that evaluation of that enrollment data means to the region? How are you serving the need? And then another area of evaluation that you have to do is when you go into Nova every December and certify your leverage funds by member and the various fund sources. So that would be things like your CAEP funds, your WIO2 funds, your non-credit apportionment, your Perkins, your LCFF, your jail funds, your CalWorks funds, and any other fund sources. And so they want to see an evaluation of those leverage funds, of how you're utilizing those in meeting the needs in your region. So there'll be a couple of evaluations and then your needs assessment. As a result, you have to come up with actionable items related to that. And there's 3 actionable items in the plan. One's related to meeting the needs. I think another one is related to student acceleration. I forget the other one, but you'll have to do some actionable items. And then there's the member effectiveness section. And so you'll have to look at your data from the last 3 years and kind of project out through goal setting what those targets would look like. And so we're going to have some webinars on this, but you're going to have to get familiar with kind of your data and the needs, and then how you can project out your targets. And so we'll require you to do, at a minimum, kind of 2 metrics at the consortia level, and then 2 at the member level. And so, and then we'll make it optional for you to add on additional metrics at the member level. And so that'll be up to the consortia to decide what additional optional metrics. We have a list of like 10 on the menu. So we'll cover this in a webinar probably at the end of May or early June, giving you a year's head start on that 3-year plan. And you can start thinking about consortia and member effectiveness. And then, as well as the governance that I referred to, that'll be something new that you'll have to submit next year. And then we also have proposed legislation that's out there that's going to make things a little bit interesting. So currently there's a bill, I think it's SB 673, that talks about getting a state level team of legislative staffers and finance and I think the Chancellor's Office, CDE, a few other organizations in the field to look at our annual data, look at the report that we submit to the legislature, provide any findings or recommendations. So there's a real closer scrutiny going to be on our data moving forward. And so that goal setting and target setting becomes really important as part of that 3-year plan and what our data looks like in our data systems. And so we know this is kind of like a difficult time because our data is kind of taking a hit with COVID. We don't know how this is going to end up this year, but at least we have a starting point. And I think everyone's in the same boat, not just adult education. So we'll see how that plays out, that passed through committee, and we'll see if it ends up being signed. The other one is a carryover bill. I think it's like 14, I want to say 61 or 16 or 91. That's working its way through committee. That would put a 15% threshold on carryover after year one. And so we're monitoring that. And so whether or not that bill makes it through, there will be an extra emphasis on carryover. Oh, 1491. Thanks, Eugene. Appreciate that. So whether that bill makes it through or not, there will be an emphasis on carryover. There will be probably a threshold developed. I'm not sure, what that percentage will be, but there will be something taking a closer scrutiny of carryover. So you will have to deal with that in the coming year. That'll be probably next year, depending on if this legislation goes through. You will see something regardless related to carryover. So let's see. Next slide, please. So now it's time for your questions. I'll see if there's anything in the chat. There's a few questions. So I actually drummed up a few questions. I'm glad to hear this. So recording, and then Emma says, will MIS data become available to consortia to review, just like CASA's summary tables, or will we be able to review college data? So that's kind of a West Ed question, but I'll take a stab at it, Emma. So semester data on the college side becomes available in Data Mart as soon as your college posts it. So some colleges are quicker than others on posting their data to Data Mart. And so you could look at that data. It won't have the matching element that Launchboard has. And that's why it takes so long to get the Launchboard data out, is because it takes the CASA's data, it takes the Chancellor's Office data, it takes the EDD base wage file, it takes the National Clearinghouse data, and as well as any GED or HiSET data that we receive from CDE. It'll match it against our student data to see, number one, that transition that I talked about, those 3 different levels of transition. It'll also look at the employment data as far as earnings, things like that. And so a lot of that data takes time to get through. So in the meanwhile, just like you look at your CASA's summary data tables on a quarterly basis, depending on how often you're submitting that, hopefully you're doing it at least quarterly. With the college system, you could look at Data Mart on a semester basis and get that data, or talk with your institutional researcher, things like that. I don't know, there might be other good suggestions out there from either someone from the college or from West Ed. So Adele says, will MIS data for community college credit ever be integrated into the state launch board? So there is a dashboard that integrates the credit and non-credit data. It's the community college pipeline. And I don't know enough about to explain that, but there is going to be a webinar coming up on that to talk about the CAEP adult ed pipeline dashboard. And I think we could actually probably cover that topic as far as how that relates to the credit side of the house of community college, because I know there's like 6 other dashboards out there. And I know a few of these dashboards incorporate the non-credit data along with the credit data. So Adele, there is an integration. I'm just not too technically savvy about what that looks like and what the caveats are, because I know that data I don't know. I don't think it has the CASAS TE data, but it would have any non-credit data reported through the Chancellor's Office MIS data. So more to come on that. And if anybody's from West Ed, I don't know if they're on the call, could probably add a little more expertise to that. So Yulene asked, MIS data is supposed to be reported in Adult Ed Launch Board, but some MIS data is not complete with transition and non-credit certificate numbers are not there. Yeah, so what happens is we're kind of like, we have to wait a year on transition. So the data that you'll see for 1920, the transition data will be of students that enroll in 1819, because we have to wait a year for the student to actually do something. So if the student enrolls in 1819, the transition data would show in 1920 of what happened to that enrolled student in 1819, where are they in 1920? So it shows that transition. So students that enrolled in 1920, we won't have their transition data until the following year, if that makes sense. Okay, so I hope I answered Shannon's question from Emma. And Marina says, does carryover apply to the 30-month spending timeline and will limit the amount of carryover after 12 months? So yeah, if the legislation goes through, Marina, it would change that 30-month spending timeline. And so that's why we're watching it closely, because going from 30 months to 12 months at a 15% threshold would be drastic for some of the consortia out there. So we are following that. Janet says, the member effectiveness and bylaw guideline will be created by the state, or is a regional expectation from the consortia? We are now finalizing our decision-making guidelines. So in the governance, there'll be, so here's how, let's see, the best way to explain this is the governance on consortia carryover would be kind of what bylaws or decision-making process do you have at your consortia level. Now, the bill that's going through would be the standard for the whole state. And so that would be kind of the minimum criteria for carryover. So whether it's 15% or 30% or 40% or 60%, that would be the, whatever legislation or the state decides, that would be the minimum threshold for carryover. Now, if the consortia, through their governance and decision-making guidelines, wants to do something even stronger, they could put that in their governance document, if that makes sense. So a little difference there. So the bill or legislation is the minimum, but you can make your governance document even stronger. Okay, and then, so Dana asks, our consortia is puzzled by this emphasis on carryover in adult ed, but not the rest of K-12. Yeah, so yeah, can't answer that, Dana, but thank you for the comment. Is there any discussion of Perkins having an adult ed oversight once again? Haven't heard anything on Perkins, but that's not my program, but I haven't had anybody from Perkins reach out to us on adult ed oversight. And so, sorry, Jody, I can't answer that. I don't know if
Neil, can I jump in?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Carolyn.
So this is Carolyn. Hi. So real quickly, I was responding to Jody's questions back and forth. And we will be collecting the CTE data for our adult schools out of TE. We talked about that yesterday at our networking meeting. The administrator over the Perkins office is learning quite a bit, as I've been sharing with her about adult education and CTE. And so the next step is to provide some training to the staff in that office so that they understand that when we're talking about CTE as it relates to adult education, we're really talking about short-term CTE, we're talking about credential attainment, and that our pathway looks a little different. And so we're going to be adding those pieces into the state plan and ensuring that adult ed really is covered within that. Thanks for letting me pipe in, Neil.
Oh, sure. Stick around. All right. So, and then thank you, Jason, for putting the link to Data Mart. If you're interested in looking at your college data that's reported into the Chancellor's Office MIS system on a semester basis. And then Shannon said, I realize that we are unique in regards to an instructional service agreement. Will CAEP provide our consortia guidance on how to utilize the data from the college in regards to an instructional service agreement? Yes. So Shannon, what I would do is reach out to CAEP TAP for maybe a consultation with West Ed to look at your ISA data, how it's being reported, and they can dive a little deeper into the data that's showing up in COMIS and see if the data that should be reporting is showing up where it should be, and is it getting reported into the launch board. So Shannon, that would be my advice for a follow-up, and CAEP TAP can facilitate that connection. And so Jason added the Data Mart semester data. It's reported 30 days after the end of term. Thank you, Jason. Okay, and then Thatcher says, I remember some mentoring of possible steps if consortium members are not meeting effectiveness. Do you know when all of that information will be rolling out officially? Will it be at the same time as all of these data metrics roll out? So the game plan is July 1, we have an effectiveness memo that will roll out to show kind of the things we're tracking, what are the process steps on member effectiveness, and this would be at the state level. So this is always the minimum. And so you could, like I said, with the carryover in response to Janet's question, you can always have some stronger bylaws when it comes to member effectiveness. So the state will have a minimum. And so that minimum will be, what are the CAEP assurances, the 21 assurances that you sign off when you receive the funds. And then we'll be tracking a subset of that because there's reporting requirements, deliverables and due dates, things like, the CASAS TE reporting. Those are due every quarter. The annual plan is due August 15th. The CFAT is due May 2nd. The, what else? We have, your certification of your fiscal reporting, your report area reporting is due, I think, December 1st. So all those things have a deadline and a due date. We'll send out reminders at first. Then if they don't come in on time, we'll reach out to the consortia lead saying, hey, what's up? Do you need technical assistance? So we'll provide that. And then if technical assistance doesn't work, then it gets referred to the state for action. And so if the state deems the member ineffective, then the consortia can reduce that member's funding following the ed code of member ineffectiveness. So that information will come out and be starting July 1. We don't really have any deliverables for the 21-22 program year until I think, we have the August annual plan, and then we have the work plan and budget, and then we have, quarter 1 for CASAS reporting. We also have Q1 NOVA expenditure data. So all that will be coming up in the fall, and we'll be tracking that, sending out reminders, offers of technical assistance, and then a worst case scenario, if all those layers and filters and reminders and technical assistance doesn't work, then we'll be making a determination on member ineffectiveness. And then that'll allow the consortia to move forward, possibly with a reduction of funds for that member. Okay, so hopefully that helps. And Jason adds, some of the files are annual, like September due dates, e.g. certificates and awards. Yes. So there are some quarterly, there are some annual. And so we'll be tracking all those necessary deliverables. There's some that are member submissions, there's some that are consortia certifications. So in that memo, we'll be telling you which ones we'll be tracking at the state level, mindful that the consortia should be tracking all of these. And so some are a little more critical than others. So more to follow on that. So look forward to that. And then Yulene listed the link to the CalPAS launch board, the adult ed pipeline. If you're interested in that, thank you so much. So Emma says, I don't see budget language. How is the 15% being correlated to performance? So don't have an answer for that. It's not my bill. But I would imagine performance related to funding could be getting the money out to the region in a timely manner. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But as you know, the bill was not sponsored by CDE or the Chancellor's office. It was sponsored by, I think, Senator McCarty. So don't have an answer on how it fits in with the shared goals, but it is part of the administrative requirement that could affect us as far as carryover. So stay tuned on that. And then Jason added additional information on timelines for semester reporting. Thank you so much on COMIS. And then Jody adds, when you mention an evaluation of enrollment and leverage fund, will that include a cost per student analysis? So it's not required in the legislation for the 3-year plan. It just says an evaluation of your types and levels of services. So if you want to go to that level of a cost per student analysis, I mean, it's up to your consortia how you're going to do your evaluation. We don't need to have it all standardized yet, but be willing to see if there's some models out there that would be interesting to share, as far as a best practice. But it's not required as far as the ed code. All right, so Janice says, yesterday CDE CASAS network meeting webinar, posted here. Thank you so much. And Connie says, thank you for all this information. Oh, okay. Sorry, Connie, see ya. Okay, so with that, we have 10 minutes. And I think I answered all the questions. Veronica, did I cover all the remaining questions, I hope?
Yes, I've been tracking along with you as you move through the questions, and yes, you covered everything.
Okay, do you want to cover the upcoming webinars and see if we have, in the meanwhile, while you're going through that, if any other questions come up?
Yes, I can. So slides, the last couple of slides of the PowerPoint are lists of upcoming webinars that we are hosting that are aligned with the state priorities. And so here you can see a list, and then we've also included in parentheses which state priority that particular webinar is aligned to. Now, some of these are scheduled, but the registration has not yet been open. So we'll definitely announce once registration is open via the newsletter, direct communication, as well as the website. Keep a lookout for registration opening for some of these, especially those that are in May. Everything in April, registration has been opened, and we look forward to seeing you all. But we just wanted to make sure that we cover webinars that are aligned to the state priorities. Some of these webinars, for example, the one on May 14th, Regional Recruitment Deeper Dive. So that is an extension from the CAEP Summit 2020. What we did was with each of the state priorities, we identified sessions that were presented at the at the summit. And we looked at the evaluation scores, and in certain categories, if the evaluation scores were higher enough and the percentage of attendees who said that they wanted to take a deeper dive on this particular topic it was stated, then we invited those presenters to come and do a deeper dive on their particular webinar. So the regional recruitment deeper dive, on the previous slide, there is one on utilizing SB 554, the role of adult education and economic recovery, beyond emergency remote teaching. Those are all extensions from the CAEP Summit 2020. So we'll do the same thing for the CAEP Summit 2021, but we invite you all to definitely engage with us with these particular webinars. And in the chat, Holly has graciously posted the links for tomorrow's transition peer learning circle, as well as next week's peer learning circle. And so those are extended conversations based on the work that High Road Alliance did for CAEP TAP on transition and immigrant integration. And so everyone who has registered for these particular peer learning circles have received a brief survey. I think there are 5 questions total, which asks about specific topic areas that you would like to be discussed during the peer learning circle. And so the facilitators, which is Jenny Malika and Peter Simon of High Road Alliance, they will use those results to frame the peer learning circle. So if you haven't had a chance to register for the peer learning circle, definitely use the link to register. Again, takes place tomorrow, April 8th at 10 o'clock a.m. And then the next one is next Thursday, April 15th at 10 o'clock a.m. And then Holly also posted the link for all of our professional development offerings at this time. Again, I ask that you check this occasionally, as we are constantly adding a lot of professional learning opportunities. We will be rolling out our 3-year plan webinar series, which will take us through parts of the summer, into the fall, and even into early spring, because we want to make sure that we provide a variety of learning opportunities as you all are working through the 3-year plan. So that is all that I have, and I don't see any additional questions, but if you do have any additional questions, please be sure to post them in the chat, or you can come off mute.
Okay, so I'm just going to summarize while we're waiting for any additional questions. So if you look at what we presented today, so you have the big picture at the state level, you have the Superintendents Initiatives and the vision goals for the Chancellor's Office. We have our shared goals of how it affects our program. And so what we have coming up is we're going to be launching kind of efforts to support your 3-year planning effort. And so you're looking at, you know, developing a roadmap for those shared goals. What is that going to look like? How are you going to meet the needs? We'll be putting into NOVA online capacity to input your 3-year plan. Also having the ability to download it for local stakeholders if you wanted to add charts and pictures and graphs and customize it as such, so you can do that as well. Along with that, we're kind of being a little more focused on member effectiveness, making sure there's a process to track deliverables and due dates, providing reminders and technical assistance if needed. And then there are consequences if you're not meeting the requirements of being an ineffective member. We're also putting a little more emphasis on the governance of the consortia by making those decision-making models updated on a regular basis, at least annually. And we're adding a section there on any bylaws you might have related to member effectiveness or carryover, because those seem to be topics of interest. So we want to see what you're doing with that. And of course, at a minimum, the state has kind of its own member effectiveness. And then we'll be looking at how that carryover legislation, what that minimum is going to be at the state level as well. And so all these other webinars that you saw related to the program areas all help meet that those targets and goals that we're setting in your plans of meeting the needs of the student in your region. And so a variety of webinars that Veronica showed us are coming up in all the 7 different topics of the state priorities, from classroom instruction to looking at equity, to program and development, to marketing, all those kind of things, a variety of topics, not just your 3-year plan, but actually day-to-day operational type stuff as well. So let's see if we had a question. We did have a question in here. So Dana, so the 3-year plan template will be significantly different than it was in the past. So it won't be significantly different because we are following the ed code as far as deliverables. So in ed code, it says you have to have an executive summary. In ed code, it says you have to do a needs assessment. In ed code, it says you have to do an evaluation of your types and levels of services. You have to do an evaluation of your fund sources. You have to do member effectiveness. You have to have an action plan, and they list out what actionable items. So all this is in ed code, and it's been in ed code, I think, for the last 4 years now. And so we're not changing it. We're just focusing our 3-year planning process more so to make it aligned with ed code. I think in the past, we've kind of maybe covered some of these topics, but maybe not specifically to ed code, since the last 3-year plan was 3 years ago. So maybe that ed code that was in place was just coming on board, and maybe we didn't have a chance to put it into the 3-year plan. So now we're being a little more intentional, and that makes sense. And when will it be available? So programmers are working on it now in Nova. And so we expect to maybe be finished by mid to late May. And so we'll have a webinar in June to cover that, if that makes sense. Okay, and then Kathy says lots of information on what the future has in store. Oh, thank you. You're welcome. And then Serena says, I appreciate the state looking to tighten up some of the systems as it pertains to member effectiveness, governance, and carryover. I personally believe the shift will help focus energy on student-centered decisions that allow for state priorities to be met and shift the trajectory of many of our most vulnerable community members. Your work is very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Serena. We haven't talked in a while, so glad to have you on the chat. Yes, and Diana says, nice to focus in on student opportunities. All right. So I'm going to turn it, I escaped with that last question. So I'm going to turn it over to Veronica to close out. And I appreciate everybody for sticking on the line and asking questions, and more to follow and more deeper dives to come. So this is just kind of an intro. So Veronica, with that, I'll turn it over to you. So thank you to TAP staff for helping today, and we look forward to seeing you at future webinars.
Yes, thank you, Neil, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We are definitely glad that this information is helpful, and we are all looking forward to the future as we go through the 3-year planning process and beyond. So I had just posted a link to the evaluation. So please take a few moments to complete the evaluation and let us know what you thought about today's webinar. We always use this information to help us as we're planning future professional development opportunities. And so now that you are aware of these state priorities, let us know if there are any topics that you would like us to take a deeper dive on, any areas of focus that you think will be great for the entire state to experience. And we can look at those topics and hopefully be able to plan professional development opportunities for you all. So again, thank you all very much for your time. Complete the evaluation. Continue to read the newsletter, as we provide a lot of important information in there, and we'll continue to do so. And then also our direct messages to you, the website, and we will be sending out the recording as well as a link to the evaluation to everyone so that you all will have access to the resources. So thank you all very much for your time this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you all hopefully tomorrow during our peer learning circle. Have a great day, everyone. All right.